My name is Mara, and I haven't spoken to another human being in 147 days. That's not a metaphor. That's not some dramatic exaggeration for sympathy or clicks. It's just the truth. 147 days since I packed a single duffel bag, turned off my phone, and drove until the road became dirt and the map stopped making sense. This cabin wasn't meant to be permanent. It was supposed to be a pause, an intermission between the life I'd ruined and whatever came next. But nothing came next. Just me, and the forest, and silence. Except now, something's changed. There's something else out there, and I think it's watching me. It started 2 weeks ago. At first I thought it was just an animal, a fox maybe, or a coyote. There are plenty of those around here. You learn to tune out the rustles, the distant howls, the faint crackle of something stepping on dry leaves just outside the cabin walls. But this was different. It didn't run. It didn't retreat. It lingered. Every night, just after midnight, I'd hear it. A low shift in the brush. The faint weight of paws, heavy ones, circling the porch steps. The first time I looked out the window and saw nothing. The second time, I saw eyes. Amber. Reflective. Set too wide apart to be anything domestic. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the room, the fireplace glowing weakly, the iron poker clutched in my hand like it could actually protect me. I stared at the door until morning, and when I finally opened it, there were footprints. Massive ones. 4-toed. Deep. Heavy. I Googled paw prints and tried to rationalize it. Mountain lion? Bear? No. Not even close. These weren't the scattered prints of an animal passing through. They were deliberate, as if something had stood there, watching, waiting. I told myself I was imagining things, that the days of solitude were finally messing with my mind. But the prints came back, night after night, always, just beyond the porch, never closer, never further. Just there, like a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. And then, 3 nights ago, I saw him. Not just eyes this time, not a blur in the dark. A lion. A real lion. Standing at the edge of the tree line, still, as stone, the moonlight catching the soft edge of his mane like a crown. I froze. My breath caught in my throat like a fishhook. He didn't move. Neither did I. We just stared at each other through the glass. One heartbeat, then another, and another, and then he turned and vanished, like mist. But the impression stayed behind, like a mark burned into the space between reality and whatever dream state I had fallen into. I haven't told anyone. Who would I tell? There's no service out here. No signal. No one who'd believe me anyway. A lion? In the middle of a North American forest? No zoos nearby? No safari parks? No news of any escape? And yet, he's real. He comes every night, and I've started leaving the front light on for him. Last night was different. It was cold. Frost kissed the corners of the window panes. My breath fogged the air as I stepped into the kitchen and poured a mug of herbal tea. No caffeine, no sugar. Nothing to keep me awake. I'd stopped trying to resist sleep. It always found me eventually, and I always woke up with my heart racing and the fire dimmed to nothing but ash. But last night, something pulled at me. A pressure I couldn't name. I sat on the couch and waited. The fire cracked. The clock ticked. The room breathed with its usual soft, living silence. And then I heard it. The boards on the porch creaked. Not like before. Closer. Slower. measured. I didn't move. I wanted to, but my limbs had become part of the furniture, heavy and hollowed out. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I turned my head toward the window. And there he was. Not in the trees, not at a distance, but on the porch, staring directly at me through the glass. The lion. His body was massive, shoulders like carved marble, his mane dark and windblown, his eyes impossibly calm. He wasn't panting, he wasn't snarling. He didn't pace, he just stood there, watching me. The mug slipped from my hands and hit the rug with a dull thud. I didn't flinch. The moment was too fragile, too absolute. We watched each other for what felt like hours. And then, just as silently, as he'd arrived, he stepped off the porch and disappeared into the dark. That brings us to tonight, to now. 14 a.m. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. My hands need to move. My brain needs something to focus on, besides the pressure in my chest and the feeling that something is about to change. He came again tonight. But this time, he didn't stop at the porch. He climbed the steps. He stood at the door, and I swear on everything I have left. He looked directly into me, and then he sat, right there, on my welcome mat like he'd been invited. And then he waited, not watching, not stalking, just waiting. I couldn't open the door. I wanted to, but I couldn't. Instead, I stood there for what felt like years. I pressed my hand against the glass. He didn't move, didn't blink, just breathed. And after a while, my legs gave out. I sat with my back against the door, and that's where I am now, writing in the dark, wondering what it means to be seen like that, so fully, so completely, by something wild, something ancient. I don't know why he's here. I don't know what he wants. But I think he's waiting for something. Maybe for me to fall asleep. Maybe for me to open the door. Or maybe he's just waiting for me to be still enough to feel again. And if I do, I think he'll come closer. The first time I left the door unlocked, it wasn't on purpose. At least that's what I told myself. I'd opened it earlier that day to shake out the rug. It had snowed overnight, not enough to cover the ground, completely, just a light dusting, soft like ash. And the rug had caught all of it. As I stepped out into the pale morning, I looked out toward the edge of the woods. Nothing. No movement. No prints. Still. I paused before going back inside. My hand rested on the handle for a long time. I could have turned the lock. I didn't. Instead, I closed the door behind me and walked away. That night, I didn't light the fire. I wanted to see, clearly through the glass. I sat on the couch with a blanket pulled to my chin, the mug of tea warm in my hands, my eyes on the window. He didn't come at midnight. He didn't come at 1. I told myself that was good, that he'd moved on, that I'd imagined the whole thing, or that he'd lost interest, or returned to wherever lions go when they aren't haunting women in the woods. But then I heard it. A slow, deep breath, not mine. It came from the porch. Heavy, controlled, calm. Stood, my legs stiff from stillness, and walked toward the window. My breath caught. He was lying down now, right in front of the door. His massive body stretched across the wooden boards, his chin resting on his front paws. His eyes were open, but barely. Like he was drifting. Like he was waiting. I pressed my hand to the glass. It fogged instantly. Still, he didn't move. I crouched slowly, just inches from the door now. and looked into his face. The moonlight revealed the smallest detail. A nick in his ear, a few white hairs beneath his eyes, his mane moving slightly in the breeze. He was real. Too real. And I couldn't decide if I was relieved or terrified, or both. The next night, he didn't wait on the porch. He was in the garden, closer. I saw him when I came out to fetch firewood. He was already there, crouched between the snow-flecked rows of old tomato plants, silent as stone. My breath caught in my throat. I stopped moving. The logs dropped from my arms and hit the snow with a dull thunk. He stood, slow, graceful, and walked forward. I didn't run. I couldn't. He didn't come too close. Just far enough that I could see the lines of muscle beneath his fur, the slow rise and fall of his chest. We stood like that for a minute, maybe two. Then he turned, padded silently across the yard, and vanished into the trees. He came every night, after that. Always closer. Always calmer, as if I were the one under observation. I started leaving the porch light on again. Not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I didn't want to miss him. Something was shifting, not just in his behavior, in me. The fear didn't vanish, but it evolved. It became awe, stillness, something wordless I didn't dare name. Daylight became harder to bear. The silence of morning felt harsher than the quiet of night. The emptiness of the cabin stung more. After the sun rose, like the warmth only emphasized how alone I was. I didn't mind the isolation at first, but lately, it felt like I was fraying at the edges. I stopped journaling. I stopped checking the battery on the emergency radio. I moved, the couch closer to the window, and at night, I waited. I didn't call him the lion anymore. Not in my head. He was just him. I started speaking to him, not expecting answers, just saying things out loud. One night, while he lay on the porch again, his eyes blinking slowly, I whispered, "Do you know why you're here?" He didn't flinch. Another night. I don't remember the last time someone looked at me without expecting anything. He exhaled, a long, quiet breath. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt it. 3 nights ago, I had a nightmare. It wasn't unusual. They come and go like ghosts in this place. Flashes of memory, of mistakes, of the face of the person I left behind when I ran away from my life. But this one was different. In the dream, I was underwater, alone, falling deeper and deeper, lungs burning, the surface too far to reach. Then suddenly a shape appeared. Fardot eyes. Him. He swam toward me, calmly, slowly, and laid his body over mine. Not dragging me upward, not saving me, just holding me still, so I could breathe. I woke up gasping. The cabin was dark. The wind howled outside. And then I heard it. Footsteps, on the porch. Slow, heavy. He was there again. But this time, he didn't wait, at the door. He stood and leaned. His massive body pressed gently, unmistakably, against the wood. Like he knew. Like he'd felt it too. Last night was the closest yet. I had fallen asleep on the couch. No blanket, no fire. Just exhaustion. The kind that sinks into your bones and anchors you down. When I opened my eyes, everything was quiet. No sound. No wind. Just breathing. I didn't recognize it at first. It wasn't mine. And it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside. Inside. I turned my head slowly. And there he was, in the cabin, standing silently by the foot of the couch. His eyes. On me, I didn't scream, didn't move. He didn't growl or lunge or stalk. He just stood and watched, and I could barely breathe, not from fear, but from the pressure in my chest. The realization that the line was gone. The boundary between wild and safe, outside and in, dream and real. It had vanished, and I was still here. Alive, and he was here. Still, and I knew. Tomorrow night. He would come closer. I don't remember deciding. I just remember standing there, barefoot on the wooden floor, hand on the knob, listening to the sound of his breathing just outside, and knowing, if I waited any longer, I would never do it. It had rained earlier that day. The porch was still damp. The air smelled of earth and pine and something wilder beneath it. The lion didn't pace. He didn't scratch. He didn't growl. He just breathed and waited, like always, like forever. The moment I opened the door, the cold hit me first, then the stillness, then him. He was closer than he'd ever been, not standing on the porch, but just below it. One paw already lifted, like he'd been preparing to take the final step forward. I froze. He didn't. He moved, slow, deliberate, like water finding a path downhill. His body brushed the doorframe as he passed through. And just like that, the lion was inside. Not a dream, not a hallucination, not a metaphor for whatever pain I was too afraid to name. He was real, his fur wet near the tips, his paws soundless on the old wood floor, his eyes scanning the space with a quiet calm that made my knees weak. He didn't roar. He didn't sniff or stalk. He just was. Present. Commanding. And utterly impossible. I backed up slowly, hands half raised, not out of fear, but in some instinctive gesture of surrender, like even my body understood the sacredness of what was happening. He stopped 3 feet from me, lowered his head, sat, and then nothing. No sound. No breath. No movement. Just him, watching, waiting. What now? I thought. But the answer didn't come in words. It came in wait, in silence, in stillness so deep it wrapped around my shoulders like a second skin. I let the door close behind him, and the world narrowed to one room, one heartbeat, one impossible presence sitting in front of me, unmoving, unblinking. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, while the lion lay 3 feet away, his body curled in a slow spiral, his breath even and unhurried. I watched the rise and fall of his side, the twitch of his tail, the steady blink of his golden eyes every few minutes, like he was checking on me. I didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Every word would have broken the spell. So I just existed in parallel, beside him, and for the first time in months. I wasn't afraid of the silence. The next morning, he was gone. I don't know when he left. I woke on the floor, a dull ache in my back, my arms cold beneath the blanket. The door was closed. The room was empty, but the rug was indented where his body had been, and my sweatshirt smelled faintly of musk and cedar. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stood and breathed and made tea. He came back the next night, earlier this time, before the sun had fully set. I opened the door without hesitation. He stepped inside without pause. No theater. No test. Just an agreement, an understanding. And this time, when I curled up on the couch, he didn't stay on the floor. He approached slowly, like a tide creeping in. And then he lay down beside me, not touching, not crowding, just close enough. His body aligned with mine, his breathing syncing to mine. And I slept. Deeply, fully. For the first time in what felt like years, I stopped marking the days after that. I didn't need to. My rhythm was no longer based on calendars or clocks. It was based on him. When he arrived, where he lay, whether he sat at the door or curled beneath the window. I spoke sometimes, softly, brokenly, about things I hadn't voiced in months, about the betrayal that shattered me, about the silence afterward, about how I left everything behind not to heal, but to vanish, and how it had almost worked. Almost. Until him. He never responded. But sometimes, when I finished speaking, he would stretch out beside me, his body warm, his tail flicking once, like punctuation. I heard you. You're still here. It matters. One evening I stayed outside too long. The sky had turned violet, and I'd wandered into the edge of the forest, drawn by the quiet and the scent of wet leaves. I hadn't realized how far I'd gone until I turned around and saw nothing but trees and fog. Panic rose in me like smoke. I spun. The shadows stretched. The wind picked up. My breath turned shallow. I called out. Once, twice, and then, from the mist, he appeared, walking toward me with that same impossible calm, his mane brushed with pine needles, his shoulders low and steady. He stopped in front of me and met my eyes. And then, without sound or command, he turned and led me home. That night, I didn't sit on the couch. I lay on the floor, and he lay beside me, close, his chest against my side, his weight partially across my legs. And I let it happen. I let the pressure hold me. I let his presence pin me to the earth. Not in fear, but in truth. You are still here. You are real. You are held. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And as I drifted toward sleep, the last thought that floated through my mind was this. I opened the door, but he walked through something much bigger. It had been raining for 3 days straight. Not a violent storm, but a steady, stubborn downpour that turned the ground to soft mud and the air to fog. The forest vanished behind a curtain of gray, and the windows of the cabin stayed streaked with water and breath. The lion came anyway. He always did. But tonight, he was soaked. Water clung to his mane, darkening the golden fur to something almost black. When I opened the door, his body looked heavier somehow, as if the sky itself had collapsed on his back. I didn't speak. He didn't wait. He stepped past me like the threshold no longer mattered. He didn't shake the rain from his coat. He didn't sniff around the room like he used to on colder nights. He simply walked straight to the middle of the cabin and lay down. His body stretched out like he owned the floor beneath him, like he had every right to. Maybe he did. After all, he was the only one who had stayed. I didn't sit beside him. Not yet. Instead, I made a fire. The wood hissed, reluctant to catch after 3 days of humidity, but I coaxed it slowly, feeding it kindling until orange warmth bloomed again in the hearth. The crackling sound filled the space. The shadows danced. I stood watching him for a long time, watching the firelight ripple across his back, his flanks rising and falling in deep, meditative breath. He was asleep. I knew that from the twitch of his ears, the way one paw flexed rhythmically. He trusted me. That should have been comforting. But instead, it made something shift inside me, something sharp. Why me? Why here? Why did he stay? I wanted to believe he was just an animal. A strange, majestic animal with instincts and hunger and habits. But nothing about this felt animal. It felt intentional. Personal. And when something sees you like that, when it doesn't run, doesn't turn away, doesn't even blink, you begin to wonder if maybe it sees something you can't, something you've hidden even from yourself. I didn't sleep on the couch that night. I lay on the rug, close to him, but not touching. I watched the fire shrink to embers. I listened to the rhythm of the rain against the roof, and then, slowly, I let myself drift. For the first time in days, I didn't dream. Just silence. Just darkness. And then, weight. Heavy. Sudden. Alive. I gasped, jolted halfway awake, but I couldn't move. Something was on top of me. Something massive. Warm. Solid. Him. His entire body was stretched across mine, slowly, deliberately, like a living blanket with muscle and heat and gravity. I froze. Not in fear. In awe. His paws rested across my stomach and ribs. His chest pressed against mine. His mane brushed my cheek. His breath poured into the space between my collarbones like fire. I couldn't breathe. But not because of panic. Because of presence. He had chosen this. To climb on top of me. To lay all of himself across all of me. To say, without speaking, I will hold you now. You will not disappear. I won't let you. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. They didn't fall. They just sat there, trembling. Caught between disbelief and surrender. I didn't dare move. I barely dared feel. He wasn't crushing me. He wasn't pinning me. But his weight was absolute. He was real. Every breath from his chest pressed into mine, slow and steady, like he was reminding my lungs how to work. I closed my eyes and let it happen. Let him have me. Not in the way people take, but in the way only something wild and wordless can offer. And in that stillness, I remembered. A hallway. A hospital. A door I never opened in time. The memory I had buried. The moment I left behind. The voice I never said goodbye to. Grief exploded like glass in my throat. But I didn't sob. Didn't scream. Because I couldn't move. Because he was there, and somehow that made it bearable. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Minutes. Hours. A lifetime. But eventually, his head shifted. He nuzzled into my shoulder, and I felt the soft scratch of his fur against my neck. His breath hitched once, then settled. Whispered, "Why me?" He didn't answer, of course not, but his body stayed, and I knew the answer wasn't in words. It was in weight, in presence, in the fact that he hadn't left, even now. Especially now. When morning finally came, the light in the cabin was pale and low. The fire was out. My back ached, and I was alone. He had gone. Just like that. No sound. No sign. Only the deep impression his body had left in the rug beside me, and the faint scent of warmth in the air. I sat up slowly, pressing my hand to my ribs, where I could still feel the echo of his weight, and I breathed, long and full. Not because I had to, but because I could. That day, I left the door open, all day. The cold crept in around the frame. The wind moved through the cabin like breath. The silence pressed against me with new meaning. He didn't come. Not at noon, not at dusk, not even after nightfall. But I didn't panic. Not this time. Because I realized something. He didn't need to stay. He'd already given me what I needed. And now it was my turn to carry it. That night, I slept on the couch. Alone. The fire glowed quietly beside me. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to listen for footsteps. I closed my eyes, and I slept. Not held, not watched, but whole. The morning after the lion lay on top of me, I woke up expecting to feel crushed, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, crushed by what it meant. But I didn't. I felt lighter, emptier, in a way that didn't ache, like something had been drained, released, like the weight that had pinned me to the floor all this time had finally dissolved into the air. The couch beneath me was warm from my body. The fire had gone out. The light from the window was pale and dust-filled. He wasn't there. Not in the room. Not on the porch. Not even in the trees. And yet, I didn't feel alone. The hours passed slowly, like honey dripping from a spoon. I moved through the cabin with deliberate slowness, half waiting for him to reappear, half testing whether I needed him to. I swept the floor, opened the windows, washed the mugs we'd left out night after night. The air smelled of pine and ash, and something I couldn't name, something that lived somewhere between memory and dream. I stepped out onto the porch. The snow had melted overnight. The ground was soft, the air mild, and for the first time since arriving, I saw no paw prints, not a single one. My chest tightened, not in fear, not in grief, but in realization. It's over. Whatever this had been, whatever magic or mystery or madness had carried me through the past few weeks, it had run its course, and I wasn't broken by it. I was breathing. I didn't cry that day, not even once. Instead, I found myself doing something much stranger. Laughed. It started as a puff of disbelief while making tea, and turned into a short burst of air from my nose. A real laugh. Because of course he was gone. Of course he'd never stayed too long. Of course the lion had left when I finally learned to stand up without shaking. He had never needed to speak. Or stay. He only needed to show me that I was still alive, still worthy, still here. And once I saw it, once I truly felt it, he was free to go. Over the next few days, the world returned. Birds I hadn't heard in weeks began to sing again. The wind changed direction, the earth thawed just enough for footprints to matter again. But none appeared. No lion, no trace, no shadow between the trees, and I began to understand. Some things don't end with goodbyes. Some bonds dissolve quietly, like smoke after fire, like breath after fear. They leave behind silence. Not empty, but echoing. Full of what once was. On the 5th morning, I woke before dawn. I hadn't set an alarm, hadn't planned anything, but something in my bones told me I needed to see the sunrise from the clearing, the same one where I first saw him watching. I pulled on my boots, a coat, gloves. I didn't speak. Didn't take my journal. Just walked. The forest welcomed me with stillness. The wind moved gently through the trees. Every sound was crisp, like the world had been polished overnight. The clearing was just as I remembered it, bare quiet, wide open. I stood in the center and let the sun rise onto my face, and I whispered, "Thank you." To the trees, to the sky, to the silence, to him, to the version of myself who had waited so long to come back. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt her, not as a stranger, but as myself. When I returned to the cabin, I knew it was time, not to leave immediately, but to prepare, to clean, to let the place rest again, to make it a space for someone else maybe someday, someone who needed to fall apart and be remade by silence, by stillness, by something they could never explain to anyone else. I packed slowly. I washed the sheets, I folded the blanket he'd once curled beside, and when I was done, I stood at the door, open one last time, and looked back. The rug was clean, the fire out, the light soft, and in the dust on the floor, one single paw print, pressed gently near the threshold. Just one, like a signature, or a promise. On the drive back, I didn't cry. I watched the trees blur past the window. I touched the spot on my chest where he had once rested, and I smiled. Because I knew he had come for me, not to haunt, not to hunt, but to hold. And now that I could hold myself, he didn't need to stay. It's been 6 months. I'm writing this from my new apartment. Small, messy, loud with city life. I go to work. I answer emails. I smile at strangers on the train. I even laugh sometimes, fully, freely. But at night, when the world quiets, I still find myself listening. Not out of need, out of memory. Because part of me still feels him. Not the weight of his body, but the imprint. The reminder that I survived. That I breathed. That I was seen. Not as broken. Not as lost, but as someone worth staying for. Even for just a little while. If you asked me whether the lion was real, I wouldn't answer. Because some truths don't need proof. Some truths live only in the breath between silence and sleep. In the warmth of a body that doesn't let go. In the stillness of a night when something wild chooses you and stays until you can stand.